Hello, I'm Steven, the calculator guy, and today we're going to talk about borrowing and lending, the super basics of borrowing and lending on DeFi. We're going to also look at one particular type of strategy called looping, which anyone can probably start doing today with enough background know-how. So let's jump right into it. There's a few things that you guys need to know about borrowing and lending if you don't already. There are a few reasons why people borrow and lend in DeFi. So when I first entered DeFi, I didn't understand borrowing and lending. I thought, well, if I want the best yield, I want to just go out and participate in these yield farm opportunities with my own assets. If I'm borrowing against my assets, why not just use my assets, right? If I'm putting $1,000 of USD down and borrowing, $750 of USD to go participate in something, why not just use the $1,000? It didn't make any sense to me. So I started looking around and understanding it, and well, there are a lot of reasons why you might utilize borrowing and lending platforms. One of them is for yield, right? There's many ways to get yield simply by lending out your assets. So you might lend your assets out on a leveraged farm. You might, which sounds kind of funny, you might lend your assets out on a money market. You may lend and borrow and get paid on both sides. Anchor famously pays you. So I'll show you. If we go to Anchor, pays you in their proprietary token for borrowing. So if we go over to borrow, okay, so now it's negative. So the borrow APR is 15.14%, which means you would pay 15.14% on your loan. However, the distribution APR is 13.63, meaning they pay you in ANC tokens to do that borrowing. Sometimes the distribution APR is higher than the borrow APR, which means you get paid for borrowing. So there are reasons to borrow there as well. Now, not in this particular case, but oftentimes when this is higher. All right, so another reason why people might want to do borrowing and lending is shorting. So when you short something, you're effectively getting exposure to the opposite of its price movement, which means if the asset goes down in value, that's good for you because now your debt is lower. Right? If you borrow an asset that is worth $1,000 and you borrow $1,000 of it, and then it goes down by 50%, that asset is now $500. So now your loan, which you borrowed, is 50% less. So you pay back 50% less. So you actually did better as a result. This is a good thing. And there are many different ways to short, and we're not going to get super into it, but you can also do delta neutral strategies through shorting, which means if you short and long something at the exact same rate, price action of the underlying asset doesn't really affect you, which is really cool. There's an interesting tomb-ish strategy. Oh, did I write his name down? Yep, that Alvaro Jimenez, who I'm going to mention because he was the one who showed it to me, came up with that I hope to do a video on in the future. Okay, and then there's longing with liquid cash. So this is sort of high risk. So shorting has medium risk because you have to understand LTV. So when we talk about LTV, we'll circle back. But longing with liquid cash, some people like to do this. I think it's insanely risky, but they will have multiple Bitcoin or whatever, Ethereum or some other asset that they really want to have exposure to super long term. And they also want access to its value. So what they'll do is they will supply or collateralize or loan their Bitcoin or Ethereum for some sort of APR, APY, between 3% and 5% maybe even 10% in some cases. And they will borrow stable coins like USDC or UST against it, and they will cash that money out into physical money. And they'll go buy a car or put a down payment on a house or whatever it is. So they still have their Bitcoin. 1 second. Okay, they still have their Bitcoin. What did he grab? They still have their Bitcoin, but also they're able to use the value of it to purchase real-world assets. Now, they do have to pay that back eventually, so it's like taking out a loan from yourself against your own collateral, with much better rates than you get from a bank, in many cases. So that's what some people do, but you really have to be aware of the risks of doing that. Okay, so let's talk about some of the necessary vocabulary. Supply. That's really easy to understand, so let's just launch this Tranquil app. Tranquil is a really basic borrowing and lending platform, so I like to use it just to illustrate what's going on. You can't see what I'm doing right now, which is good. Entering my password in MetaMask, not that it really matters. You can't do much with my password, you need my seed phrase. Okay, so here you can see these are the supply markets and these are the borrow markets. So the supply markets are where you supply your assets. Now the supply markets will also be where you supply your collateral. So you can supply for other people to borrow, or you can borrow against them yourself. So that's one of the really cool things in DeFi. One of the phrases you may hear often is "be the bank" or "be your own bank," BYOB, with a little bit of a twist. So here's the supply markets, here are the borrow markets. It is exactly what it sounds like. You're either supplying assets or you're borrowing assets. You can borrow assets against your collateral. In fact, that's the only way you can borrow assets at the moment, because there are some protocols attempting to create like credit systems where you can borrow without collateralizing, without supplying collateral. But I think it's a very dangerous thing to do in the world of DeFi. We'll see what happens. And then collateral. So collateral itself, if you don't already know, is just assets that you've supplied to borrow against. So in the risk that what you borrowed is not returned, that's okay. The platform has the collateral. They can liquidate it, they can eat it, they can sell it for the money that you borrowed. They're happy, right? There's no big deal. Okay, LTV. This one is super important. I'm going to put super important. LTV is loan to value, and loan to value tells you when you're going to get liquidated. So I haven't memorized all of the LTVs for all the platforms, but I believe, and I could be wrong on this, that Anchor's LTV is something like 65%, maybe it's 55%. What it effectively means is if the asset that you borrow, if the borrow value goes above 75% of your total collateral, you're at risk of liquidation. And some platforms, some protocols will partially liquidate you. Some protocols will completely liquidate you. So really, read your white papers, guys. Now, what are white papers? That's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked. White papers are the docs. And so, are the docs available here? Most protocols will have something called docs. And the docs are the white papers, and you can go and click through and see sort of what happens in the case of liquidation. What I will say is Tranquil's docs, white papers are really anemic. There's not much happening here. If we go to Anchor's docs, do they keep them on the bottom? Is this their docs or is this their GitHub? No. Oh, that's cool. Night mode. I like that. Okay. Dark mode, whatever. No. But, you know, if you wanted to find the docs, I could go to Anchor docs, Anchor protocol. Yeah, here we go. And you can read through the docs and see like what happens in liquidation, and you can see sort of what their LTV is and this and that. So, do they say it's safe risky? Yeah. Okay, so that's not right. Yeah. So, anyways, you find the LTV. The LTV for Tranquil is pretty easy to find. It tells you. It's a collateral weight in this case, which is not populating, but 75%, which effectively means if you collateralize your Ethereum and you borrow something against it, if the thing you borrowed becomes valuated at above 75% of whatever you supplied, you're at risk of liquidation. So keep that in mind. Can be super risky. All right, so why is LTV important? Well, it's important with shorting and longing because with shorting, generally speaking, what you do is you provide USD or USDC or something like that, and you borrow a more volatile asset against it, like Phantom or Bitcoin or Ethereum or AVAX, whatever, and then you go and you try to get yield on that asset, right? And then you can keep all the yield that you want. Yay, you have some yield. As long as you return the asset, you're fine. You get to keep the yield and return the asset. So the problem is, if you borrow, let's say at a 60% LTV, right? And then that asset you borrowed starts to gain in value, well, that LTV is going up because let's say you collateralized $100, you borrowed $60 of Phantom, and Phantom starts to increase in value. Every time it increases in value, that 60% of your supply goes to 61%, 62%, 65%, 70%, and the moment it gets past 75% or whatever the LTV cap is, boom, liquidated. So you gotta understand your LTVs, which is why I'm going to show you a low risk strategy that doesn't really expose you to LTV, which is cool, which is called looping. So what is looping? Well, looping is really simple. Looping is where you supply an asset and you borrow against that asset. You borrow the same asset of the asset you supplied, right? So the LTV will never change. If you have Ethereum and you borrow, if you supply Ethereum and you borrow Ethereum, if the price of Ethereum goes up, your collateral and your loan go up at the same rate. They go down at the same rate. So the LTV never changes, which is really nice. Because the LTV never changes, you can borrow a whole bunch more without much risk. So let's talk about looping. You will supply here, right? You supply whatever you want. Maybe you supply 321 Ethereum because you're a super baller. And then you borrow some Ethereum. You can only borrow 75% of whatever you deposited. So you deposit 1 Ethereum, you can borrow 0.75 Ethereum. And what do you do next? You take that Ethereum and deposit it as more collateral. And then you can borrow 75% more. And deposit, and borrow, and deposit, and borrow, and deposit. And every time you deposit, it's another loop. And what that does effectively is it increases your total value, total supplied value, and increases your total supplied borrow. And if you're getting paid to borrow and paid to supply, you're now getting 8.7% not on the initial 1 Ethereum or $100 you supplied. You're getting it on the looped, cranked up, leveraged value. So imagine this, right? You supply $100, then you borrow $75, and you deposit $75. So now you've supplied $175. Then you borrow $25 and you supply that. So now you've supplied $200. The original yield, let's say, is 10%. So $100, 10%, you get $10 a year. But now that you've looped, you have $200. Now you're getting $20 per year. You've effectively doubled your APR, APY just by looping without gaining any exposure to shorting or LTV. So that's what we're doing, right? So here you would deposit, click deposit, go over to Ethereum. You would, whatever the safe max, I mean, I would just maximize it because there's no real risk of LTV issues. Whatever it is, you borrow and then you come back over here and you supply it again. And you keep doing that process over and over and over again, minimal gas fees, until you're happy. Now, I have built a calculator for this, my loop calculator. So, as a reminder, all my calculators, blue stuff you can edit, green stuff don't touch. That's automatically generated. Blue stuff is inputs, green stuff is outputs. So in this case, right, we have Ethereum, max LTV 75%. Initial Ethereum price, well, the price of Ethereum right now is like 3,300. But let's just say it was 3,000. And then let's say you just use 1 Ethereum. So the initial value is going to be $3,000, right? That's the initial value. This is automatically generated, the initial value of what you supplied. Now you look at the supply APR, rewards APR, borrow APY, rewards APR. So where do you find these? Well, if you go over to Tranquil, or most things like Tranquil, you can click on and you can see these. So I've already entered these, let's see, 277,588. These will change dynamically. So 277,588. Just for the sake of this, borrow. You will have a negative borrow APY. It's going to be important. We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's see, negative 767, 1230. 767, 1230. Okay, cool. So our total APR is 12.12%. Great. APY, this is if you compounded that, would be 12.89%. So we want to loop, and we're going to loop a number of times. And over here, you can sort of see what looping would do. And what you want to look for is where the total borrowed fiat starts to taper off, right? It looks, okay, 2,000 to 4,000 is a big difference, 4,000 to 5,000, big difference, 5,000 to 8,000, big difference, 8,000 to 9,000, okay. But 9,814 to 9,873, small difference. So at about 13 loops, we're going to get diminishing returns for the amount of effort it takes us to loop. So I'm only going to loop 12 to 13 times. And you can see our borrowed amount of Ethereum becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until it really just is not worth the looping process anymore. So let's say 12 loops. Future Ethereum price, let's say the future Ethereum price is 3,300. Well, let's just say it's the same price, right? Okay, so days out, in 10 days, we're going to get an ROI of 1.3%, pretty good. We're going to get 0.013 Ethereum in that 10 days. It's all profit. You realize that, it's all yours. And the total Ethereum, this is how much Ethereum you have now. Okay, profit, 39 bucks. Cool, 10 days, $39 off 1 Ethereum. Not bad, right? Now let's see what happens if we change the price. If we change the price, now our ROI in fiat goes up. Right now we have $342 in profit because of the price difference, but we still made the same amount of Ethereum. So the ROI in Ethereum is not going to change because the ROI in Ethereum doesn't care about the value of Ethereum. It only cares about Ethereum and the APRs and APYs and yada, yada, yada. So that's effectively what this does. And you can even see, if the value goes down, 2,700, it would take you a fair amount of days, but you wait 200 days at a low value of Ethereum and you're still going to make money. So keep that in mind. All right, so what you can see is when you loop, your loop APY changes pretty dramatically depending on the number of loops. We go from 2.7% to 10%, from 5 to 22%, and so your effective APR goes from 12% to 47.23%. We have increased our APR by almost 4x. That's amazing. That's the power of looping. And so your loop APY estimate, which is if you compound, is 60.32%. So let's quickly talk about compounding and why it's so incredibly important, especially with these strategies. So you see here, there's a negative 7.67% APY, which means that you're paying negative 7.67% in Ethereum. Now, I believe that Ethereum comes out of your collateral, which means if it's coming out of your collateral is slowly going down by 7.67% APR. So if you don't continuously add some rewards to that collateral, you may go under that 75, or you may go above that 75% LTV line and get liquidated. So what you have to do is simply compound. Now, what is compounding? So compounding is where you will take your rewards. So what they're going to do is they're going to pay you 2.77% in Ethereum, and then 5.8% in Trank, their native token. Here, they're going to charge you 7.67% in Ethereum, but they're going to pay you 12.3% in their native token, Trank. So what you have to do with that Trank to make sure that you never you're never at risk of liquidation, is go over to the dashboard, wherever that is. Now, this is not how much money I have in there. I've cranked it up through looping, so don't think I'm a big baller like that. What you're going to do is you're going to see these Trank rewards, and you're going to have rewards like this on whatever platform it is. You're going to click Claim on those rewards. Then you're going to go somewhere. So, for example, you might go to SushiSwap, and you're going to sell those Trank rewards for the asset that you're collateralizing. So, let's say Trank, and you want to sell that, in this case, for Ethereum. So you sell your Trank for Ethereum, you go back to Tranquil Finance, you go back to markets, you go back to Ethereum, and you would deposit those rewards. Not only is this turning your APR, which is static, into APY, which is compounding, and compounding interest is so much better, right? We have that 47% versus that nice 60%, but it's also reducing your LTV and protecting you from liquidation. So that's really important. Okay, so now we've talked about looping, right? Looping is simply supplying and borrowing the exact same asset and then resupplying that borrowed asset a number of times to crank up your APR, APY. Now, maybe you're thinking, hey, I don't want to go on the Harmony blockchain. I don't want to be doing this. Where do I find protocols, right? Where do I find protocols for lending and borrowing? Well, you're in luck. DeFi Llama, which I talk about constantly just because of how amazing it is, has a bunch of different protocols that you can utilize. If you scroll down through the bar on the left, you'll see lending. Click on lending, and you're going to look at all of the lending protocols by their TVL. So, I mean, literally, over $30 billion is locked in these protocols. These are really big in the DeFi space. And all of these are going to have slightly different opportunities. You can see Anchor, which we touched on earlier. Compound is really big. Just Lend is climbing in the ranks, in my opinion. Wow, that's not Optimism? Okay, so a whole bunch. Geist is on Phantom. So a bunch of different markets that you can do strategies similar to this on. And, check them out. See which chains you want to participate in. I don't know if you guys can hear my son sort of singing behind me. He's 2. But anyways, you can see which chains you want to participate in and then click on the protocol accordingly. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Also, I have added the link to the loop calculator for you guys to use however you would like. So blue stuff, you edit, green stuff, don't touch, and it should be pretty straightforward. So that's it. If you want access to like my instructionals and my calculators before anyone else, you can go ahead and join the Patreon. We are just about capped, so there's that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please borrow and lend responsibly. If you're going to do the shorting or longing, keep track of your LTV. It's super important to keep track of that. Know what your risk is, know what price you will get liquidated at, because if you don't know that, you're going to be in a really bad way. So maybe by the time I release this video, to the time you access the loop calculator, I may add a little mini liquidation calculator to sort of tell you what price you get liquidated at, because I want you guys to be as protected as possible from liquidation. It's not a good time. Now, maybe you're on Kujira and you're earning from people's getting liquidated, which is great, but I don't want anyone who follows me to get liquidated at all. I don't want anyone to get liquidated. It's not, it's not a thing you'd wish on people. So please, if you're going to do shorting, if you're going to do longing, just monitor your investments constantly. And that's it. So thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful, fantastic, and amazing rest of your day. Oh, I totally forgot how to tell you guys how to exit this strategy, which is something that people always ask me. So let's look at that really quickly. Okay, so let's say you want to exit the strategy, you're done. It's super simple, but really annoying. So you just go to whatever it is that you collateralized, and then you take out a tiny bit at a time. So maybe like 0.1. Can I even take out 0.1? 0.05? I don't know. Oh no, sorry. I'm withdrawing. So you want to take out a little bit at a time. So you would withdraw that, right? And then you would repay that loan, which is going to allow you to take out more again, to withdraw more, 0.2 this time, and repay that loan. And you're going to keep doing that. You're going to keep de-looping over and over and over again until eventually you repay the entire loan, and then you can just withdraw your assets. So that's it. Okay. Thank you again so much for watching. Hopefully you understand how to exit the strategy now. If you stayed to the end of the video, if you didn't, you're probably going to ask me in the comments.